cut in foam to any size you want, and then you just texturize that with plaster, and they make molded big pieces, and it gets brought to the foundry, and you can make anything from this size up to the size of an airplane bronze with this new CNC scanning and cutting technology. So it's really fun. And I was like, ooh, the possibilities are pretty good. So I've been watching YouTube videos and talking to the foundry and talking to different people to figure out what the next steps are. So I think I'm onto something to do with that. And I just put one submission in Alberta to, they do a call to artists, which means the artists do all the planning, all the drawing, all the budgeting, all the rough-ins for a project that may or may not get accepted. So you do all the free work and hope that you're going to get the job. So I kind of don't like doing that, but I think because I want to get my foot in the door, I've started putting in a few proposals. Anyway, so you guys can come and spin that. The novelty wears off really fast, but it's fun. And I thought that was a nice extension. 3D is a nice extension of what I've been doing with my 2D stuff. So this one's a little weirder. Well, they're all a little weird, but I've had some fun with sculpting. So
it's really neat, but because the eyes aren't, there's no pair of eyes that's the same. Like the eyes are all different.
Yeah, they all kind of do this little googly.
Yeah, like.
I want them all looking up a little bit that way. So, yeah, I want to just play with different noses, different features, different mouths. So we got more of a Mayan look, or a little bit of a Hindu. A little more of a droopy French nose, Spanish kissy face, more like an innocent Greek mask maybe. And I like the idea of everybody in the world being puzzled a little bit, like what are we here, what are we here for? You know, you're kind of enjoying it, but it's all a little strange. And that's kind of the feeling I want to get from this closure. So if you go on my website, there's all my sculptures around there, the ones that I've done. So I don't often paint from photos. This is a piece I'm doing from a photo. This girl came and took my class, and she had so much color on it. I'm like, oh my god, because I keep saying I want to paint lighter imagery. I said, does it sound creepy if I asked if I could take a picture to paint? And she said, no, I love it. So anyway, so I took a nice photo of her, and I'm going to actually paint it. And I thought it'd be a really nice photo to paint from, and she had such nice coloring that I thought it'd be really fun. So that's the one I'm starting this week, or started this week, and I don't know if I'm going to paint on this today. I'll do some demos. Anyone have any questions?
I have a question about Belgian linen.
Yeah.
Have you ever painted acrylic on it?
No.
And you wouldn't?
This is oil prime linen. So I buy mine oil primed, but if you buy acrylic primed, it's called universal primer.
Okay.
That's a gesso. Basically, gesso is a lot of white chalk and pigment with PVC glue.
Right.
Whereas this has oil actually in it.
Okay.
So the acrylic wouldn't, it might stick mechanically, like it might bind into the grooves, but you could scrape it off and peel it off.
Got it.
So there's not a Belgian linen for acrylics.
This is oil primed Belgian linen, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about materials and how. So I use Belgian linen. You can buy shitty canvas pads. You can buy, that's the artist term for not quality, shitty. So this is just a demo pad I use. I don't even know what it's made of. I think plastic. You can gesso watercolor paper if you want, and then paint on that for oil studies if you're outside. When I first started painting, I used canvas, and maybe 18 years ago I kind of did a switch, and as soon as I used the Belgian linen, I'm like, even when I had no money, I'm like, I don't care, I'm painting on this, it's just such a nice surface. So I stretch it myself. It gets a little buckly when you stretch it, so you have to kind of lay it out flat with your stretcher bars, pull it all evenly so you don't put creases in it. Once the crease is in it, you always see the crease. So it takes a little care to stretch. I had Walter at Northwest stretch some for me, and he's good with he's good, but I had to re-stretch them all and get everything just right, so I ended up just doing it myself. I actually trained somebody to come and help me do it, but he takes twice as long as me, so I just do everything myself. Yeah, so this is, you can come and feel these at the end or whatever. This is a really smooth portrait linen. This one's a little more textured here. The reason I use linen is linen has a longer fiber than canvas. The cotton canvas has really short fibers, and with just humidity and expanding and contracting, it doesn't hold its weave for as long. So conservators actually like this on a conservation level. But for me, it's just this quality of the surface, and with the oil priming that I get, the paint comes off the brush just so it doesn't feel like you're painting on slippery plastic.
Right.
The oil sinks in a little bit from each layer into the canvas, and then from the next layer a little bit into the next layer below it. And it just feels good coming off the brush. It's pretty forgiving too. You can wipe off, and it's just a nice surface. It doesn't have a mechanical feel. So this is just a bad, quick demo head. This is a flat, filled in umber and green treescape with a bit of umber and white, maybe a bit of yellow ochre bottom, just flat. So I brought a couple of dud kind of underpainting things that I'll just play with over top of with some paints. I'll do the color demo first. I feel like there's no magic, so I'm trying to make it sound exciting. I want to get lots of oohs. You're recording this, right? So when I paint, I usually use a wooden palette. I don't use disposable, but I know what my colors look like on here, but you guys wouldn't be able to tell what I'm doing, so I'm putting it on white for you guys to see the color. So we're going to play make believe. I got my Indian yellow. It's actually Indian yellow orange, this one. So it's a lot warmer, a lot redder than what I was hoping to have. So usually for glazing techniques, I use my transparent colors, and then I paint opaque and transparent into a transparent film.
What does that mean?
I'll show you.
Okay.
So there's quinacridone magenta, Indian yellow fake, and ultramarine. Ultramarine is a violet blue. These are all transparent colors. When you spread the paint out, you can see through the paint. If I put a cadmium red and I spread it, it's really got good coverage, so it's opaque. And what makes an opaque paint versus a transparent paint is the size of the particle, the actual chemical that the paint is made from. Every color is a different chemical. It's not just like red, titanium, blue titanium. Every color is actually a different sized particle. So these are all really fine particles. It lets the light bounce through the particles. So that's why you get the depth of color that you get from transparent paint. So these are transparent colors. We'll stick out a few opaque colors.
Can I ask, do you know, that's the same, that's also true in watercolor?
Yeah. Yeah.
Colors? Okay, thanks.
And they give, like, you can buy glazing mediums where it actually adds a little bit of film around the particles so the light bounces a little better. So that's what sometimes mediums do. That's what varnishes do when you add varnish to paint. Okay, so trick number one, wet brushes. You can have 100 wet brushes on your table and you get dirty as heck with oil paint. So I have a number of these. It's called the Michael Abraham pea bucket. If you need a pea bucket, you know who to call. So that's one way of staying clean. The other way of staying clean with oil paint is to have a phone book to wipe instead of always using a rag and then touching the rag and getting paint everywhere. I can use rags, but I'm always cleaning my palette knife, and I have color on the knife, and I don't want it on the knife. I just do this, and it pretty much comes clean. The art stores will sell you 100 different kinds of palette knives, and I have about 20 of them that I inherited from somebody, and I still use the same ones. This is the one I like. I like the shape. I like the way the paint comes off. I like the mixing. If I need to mix a bigger color, I'll use a similar size or similar shape. The longer they are, the more they have a chance to fling paint everywhere, so I like a shorter one. Yeah, so dry brushes, wet brushes. I use a whole variety of brushes, synthetic brushes. They're made of plastic usually, some kind of plastic. Or I use hog's hair. This is hair from the back of a pig. And they put it in here. This is a nice stiff brush. And a stiffer brush is better for pushing paint around. If you get a floppier brush, which I don't have too many of, like this. Well, that's actually pretty stiff. Never used it yet. 6 months. That's actually getting paid too. A lot of times people use the wrong brush. They'll use a short brush that's really stiff. They're trying to push the paint around and it doesn't come off the brush right. So every artist is different. Some people don't mind a stiffer brush or a floppy brush. With oil paint, if you have a floppier brush, add a little more liquid to make the paint move around. You can have a more liquid paint film, but if you add too much liquid to the oil paint, it doesn't make the most stable paint film. So I like to find just the right brush and just the right consistency to the paint. I use a $100 watercolor brush for softening, blending, and I don't actually clean it with soap or water. I usually just wipe it on a ever-present rag, or just to get the oil paint off. I'll just do that if I had to clean it. I'll show you how I use that. And I paint. There used to be oil paint. Everyone thought it was toxic. Most people use turpentine, become allergic to turpentine over time. Now with oil painting, you don't need to use turpentine. They have odorless mineral spirits. It evaporates a lot slower than turpentine, like 1/5 the evaporation rate. So it's nice to use. Your paint stays wet longer, fluid longer, not as toxic. Still, you don't want to be in a room closed. It's giving off a little bit of gas, but it's not as bad as turpentine, and you won't develop an allergy to this very fast, if you do at all. All paint is just pigment. Quality paint. You can buy shitty student grade paints. They add wax, they add filler like chalk. I don't know what else they add. But if you're buying good quality paint, all you're getting is pigment particles and oil. It's already mixed. So you can just buy your paints. When you squeeze out some tubes, the oil separates. So you can see that lump of liquidy oil. So I use my phone book for everything. So if I need cadmium red, I just put it on the phone book. Andy's heard all of this before.
Do you have a preferred brand of paint?
I use Gamblin mostly, or free tubes of good quality paint people give me. I buy Winsor Newton if I can't find the color I want. So with a phone book, if there's too much oil that comes out of the tube, a lot of people just mix it in, but then you have this really oily red. So I just put it on the phone book, and it actually sucks the oil right into the phone book. And then you can get the paint back to a consistency that's more of oil paint consistency, not a runny.
The ink from the book doesn't affect the paint?
Nope, doesn't come off. So, yep, so then when you're done, oil painting 101. Start from scratch. This will just wipe off. And the only time I get really dirty is when I demo. So if I have paint on me, let me know. So that's transparent. Those are opaque colors. This one's, it says right on the tube if they're transparent or opaque. This one's transparent. Let me see if I can find it. This one's a semi-transparent. So it just means a little more light bounces through when it's a lot more light bounces through when it's transparent.
So what color is that?
This is cerulean blue. I don't actually know my color names. I just grab them. So most art stores will sell you all sorts of colors. They'll sell you yellow ochre and sap green and radiant yellow, and there's like 40 or 50 colors in their line, or 60 colors. You don't need any other colors than maybe just a minimal palette to make pretty much every color. If I had my Indian yellow, I could probably make almost every color of the rainbow, light, dark, deep, rich. My first layer of painting is always opaque. So I don't actually use my Indian yellow in my first layer unless I just want to tint something a little bit. I always try and have a good body color, I call it, where there's a nice solid paint layer on there that's not a stain. It's more like a paint layer. So a stainy color would look like this. And it doesn't have good coverage. It gives you nice light, but it doesn't have good coverage. So in my underpainting, I would probably try and make a color. If I wanted that color, I'd try and make it. So I would take an opaque yellow. I actually use browns and different colors in my underpainting, but I'm just going to keep it simple for now. So I would try and replicate that color and get a good base color. You can add a little bit of transparent into your whites, but my underpainting color would be opaque. I don't know if you can see the quality of the paint, but it's actually a thicker covering layer. And I do that so I don't get that sort of see-through stain. A lot of times you see paintings and there's like acidy yellows or acidy blues, which can work. Some people like that. For me, I don't like that. So this is how I do my process. If I need to make a darker color, I do pull out Mars Black, because Mars Black is an opaque black. Ivory Black is a transparent black. So a lot of times people do an underpainting in an oil paint with an ivory black, and you're not getting the body quality that you need to get a nice transparent color over top of. If you look at Ingres, Raphael, Artesia Gentileschi, anybody from say 1540 to up to the turn of the century that was painting in oil paint, they always had a solid underpainting first with good covering, good like film of paint, and then they glaze over top of that. And what a glaze is usually a transparent or semi-transparent color over top of the paint film. So I'm gonna just do a little color demo.
So where does bone black come into that?
I think that's probably
It's the transparent
probably
one
somewhere in
too.
between there. I don't know what. There's somebody pulled bone black out. This is bone black.
I guess I just showed it recently and it's a transparent one.
I don't know if you can see this on there, but don't look. This is ivory black. That's Mars black. That's bone black with spit. So they're all a little different. Mars black is a little less deep. That's ivory black. A little less deep. So I put quite a bit on there to get the coverage. But Mars black, you just put it on and it covers right away. But it's not as deep. It's a little warmer. But it's really good for underpainting. When you do a glaze over top, a transparent glaze over top of a Mars black, you're going to get as dark a black as an ivory black, but you get a really good coverage. So I just made a grayscale because sometimes when I copy a photo, I want to see, I might make a color here when it's a tone of something that's yellow here when it should be over here. So I just use these grayscales. So here's my Mars black. If you buy tubes, sometimes they stiffen in the tube. You could add a touch of oil, but there's a point where it gets too stiff and you can't really use it. And I think this tube is right about there. If it comes out of the tube too runny, you do the squirt it on a phone book, let some of the oil soak out. So in terms of color, so you got your reds. Quinacridone magenta is pretty close to a primary. There's another red called Anna something Perdone, and it's pretty much a red that doesn't have a violet sort of side to it, and it doesn't have a orange side to it. It's really good like primary, but it's not as permanent a color. So I use quinacridone magenta as my red. This is the basic color scale. We're going to pretend that's Indian yellow, ultramarine blue. So you can make any color of the rainbow with these three colors, sort of. So just put that there. If you mix ultramarine blue and quinacridone magenta, you get almost a black, but it's got a purple hue to it. So to kill the purple, the opposite of purple is yellow on the color wheel. You just add a touch of yellow, and I'm going to have to use this yellow, and it'll actually make a perfect black. So that's the beauty of transparent colors, is you don't. If I used this yellow here to mix to kill that purple, it'll actually lighten up the color a bit. So I'm not staying into a black, I'm getting into lighter colors. So with this, I can have a warm dark color, green, or I can have a cooler dark color. I always just, if I'm mixing a color and I'm like, oh, this green's too green, a lot of people add black. I always just go the opposite. What's the opposite? If I mix a gray that's too blue, and it's a little too blue, I just add a little bit of orange. I just go across the color wheel and add whatever the complementary color is. And it only takes a touch of color to switch the intensity of the color off. So if I add white to each of these, I'll just add, that's going to give me a nice neutral gray. So I don't need to buy a black. That's a good covering gray. I can use that for my underpaintings if I wanted. If you add, if this were true Indian yellow and I added white to it, it looks really orange when you get squeezed out of the tube. But if you just add a touch of white to it, it almost looks exactly like a cadmium. So you don't need to buy a cadmium. You don't need to buy a. And the only reason I like this blue is because when I want to make a green that's really limey green, this blue has a little bit of a red sort of quality to it. So I just grab a blue that's closer to a green than to a purple. So with this minimal palette, I can pretty much make every color in the rainbow. Just gonna make limey greens. And then all color just comes out of that base. Any color you buy, so whether it's yellow ochre, let's grab these. Yellow ochre is just a dirty yellow. It's like yellow with just a touch of the complementary across. Maybe that's a little too green, so if it's a little too green, I just add a touch of red. And I make it a yellow ochre. If you want to make a brown, the closest color to brown is red or orange. Somewhere in there is brown. So if I want a warm brown or a yellow brown, I just add a little more yellow. So I'll just start with an orange. That doesn't look that orange. You can add a little more. If I add white to it, you'll see what I mean by orange. Right? So I don't need to buy cadmium oranges. If that were true Indian yellow, that would make a really bright orange. So that's why I like Indian yellow. You can make pretty much any color with it. If I want to make a brown, I just take a brown, and brown is just a dirty orange. So I just add a little bit of blue to it. And I basically got my two colors. If I squeeze this out, I can mix it so that it would match that. I just have to find the right amount. So we don't need to buy browns. Save you a few bucks. You guys all owe me $5 now. And then light and dark is just the amount of white you add. So you can get every tint. So people say, well, I need grays. You don't just take the closest color to gray is blue, the closest color to brown is orange. They're the opposite sides of the color wheel. So if you want a violet gray, just add a little bit less yellow, a little bit more of the other colors. So just add a touch of yellow to that, and then get a slightly, the more yellow I add, it should come closer into the color wheel. Until it goes into the center. That still has a purple quality, so if I want to kill the purple quality to bring it to gray, just add a little more yellow. And I think I have too much red, so I'm going to add a little bit of blue. Obviously. In art school, the teacher would say, make a chart, and you'd have all these colors out, and you're like, it should have been explained with 3 colors and white, right? So you get the darkest dark to the lightest light, and then any color around. So color theory, I don't know why. We had a guy named Francois Tepo, and he just let us play the color. And the other color class had to do like 4,000 color squares in order from light to dark, and from black to red, and black to green, and cross complementary charts, and all these things. Like, ooh, we just had fun with color, right? So this is the simplest way of mixing color. You don't need to buy neutral grays, you don't need to buy browns, you don't need to buy oranges. You just stick with your simple red, yellow, blue. If you want a more opaque color, you just grab your more opaque color. If you want a more transparent color, you stick to your transparent colors.
I think that probably works because they're all transparent and like clean colors. Because if you like when I tried to do a color wheel with someone else, it's like you start getting if you mix a bluish red with a with a complementary color, you start getting mud, right? Because the colors aren't pure. Like, but with these transparent ones, you don't have that problem.
You don't have that problem. You can pretty much mix any color anybody's wearing or any color you see in the room. The odd time you might need to buy, like, that's a fluorescent orange shirt. You can get pretty close to that with a glaze on white, though. I'll show you what I mean by that. So when I talked about glazing, somebody asked me about glazing, right? Who said what's glazing? This is just a chunky. This is just there's different types of white. I talk about whites when I do a class. This is it's called a flake white replacement. It's a modern. They add alkyd medium to it, and it's quite thick, so you can get really nice textural stuff with this. If you feel this after, you'll see how textured it is. This is more blended. But on top of the white, when you put a transparent color, I usually paint with a mixture of half oil, half mineral spirits for my second layer. There's the principle of fat over lean. With each layer, you should be a little bit more oil. So if your first layer is with mineral spirits and adding it to the paint, you never want to make paint watery. You always want to make it like a cream or thicker. So I just put it, this is mineral spirits, same stuff you use to thin your paint, you can clean your brushes with. And this is a coil bucket, so all the paint particles fall to the bottom. Whenever I have lots of paint on my brush, I always wipe it on the foam book first, and then I go in here, so I haven't actually changed this in a year and a half. I haven't had to wash my cleaning jar or anything.
What did you say was in there?
Odorless mineral spirits. So all I use is oil and mineral spirits, and then when I've finished my painting, I wait a couple of months, and then I varnish it with a store-bought varnish made by the same company. Gamblin makes a really nice varnish now. It's like watery thin, it doesn't yellow, it's easy to remove. The old varnishes, all the old master paintings, they had Demar varnish, or different types of chemical mixtures, and they would usually darken, crack, that kind of stuff. The Gamblin makes a varnish that doesn't yellow, doesn't crack. It lets the paint still breathe, so even if you varnish too early, it doesn't matter. You used to have to wait 6 months to a year to varnish a painting, and now you can varnish within. I got a friend who does it within a week or two. So you don't even have to wait that long anymore. So I used oil for my second layer. And if I put this color with transparent, so I'm just going to put a transparent red on this white. You just get a glowing pink. So it's, you can see that. So there's no white added to that transparent film. If you look at old master paintings, you can actually see there's a transparent color sitting on top of that.